So this is Michael Finocchiaro. I've got Rob between two meetings, Dr. Bob Engels of
Thank you.
Capgemini. I'm doing this podcast about AI in product lifecycle management with a lot of startups. Dr. Bob Engels is an expert at Capgemini on AI.
I have the AI lab in Capgemini. So when Michael and I met at the engineering conference in Capgemini, we decided to actually record this together and bring it to you.
And so we spent about 30 minutes talking, exchanging on questions, and we think you're going to really appreciate it. So watch watch the rest.
Enjoy it.
Two,
Go
one.
for it.
Hi, it's nice to meet
Hi,
Bob Engels of Capgemini. This is my inaugural webcast. You've been around AI for quite a long time, and you're one of the spokespeople for Cap in this area. How is your view of intelligent systems in terms of the evolution from expert systems and machine learning to today's LLMs?
Well, what you would see, Michael, what I've experienced in my life, I started with AI in 1998. So I really went through a few rounds with that. I would say AI is going full circle in a way. So we started with like expert system, rule-based system, pretty deterministic, rule-based, but they could also explain what they did. Two connectionist models because we were a bit lazy. We wanted to learn from the examples directly. We lost some of the transparency and some of the explainability along that road. Capability became better and better and better. So we in the end we could actually do a lot of the tedious tasks automated, like the deep learning networks. They were very good in data pre-processing, the feature selection, all the stuff that we needed to do by hand. And now you see that deep learning went further to LLMs, transformer algorithms, even larger data sets. We learned the trick for vision, we learned the tricks for sound, we learned the tricks for speech. So we're very good in imitating this kind of processes now. But we lost a lot of the correctness and the determinism in that sense. And what you see now is there is a lot of speech about hallucination, but it is basically error handling, probabilistic error, that they try to turn down by using crisp methods again, like knowledge graphs, like logically correct knowledge, like crisp knowledge, just to make sure that these LLMs follow the tracks that are actually qualified. And that for me is a bit like full circle.
But it's also interesting that rather than a really technical computer geek language like Lisp, now the language is English, right? It's also a big transformation, I think. Especially with vibe coding, the programming language is just English, which is kind of crazy. I'm sorry, I forgot to ask. So, what's your role at Capgemini?
As my role at Capgemini, I lead the global AI lab. So that is actually cross business line, cross region, cross sector. So it is really the application of AI, the technology of AI. What is the technology able to do? What do the businesses need? What kind of data requirements are there? What kind of infrastructure governance do you need? And of course, last but not least, what are all these new, incredibly cool possibilities that you get?
Right, and all these new startups.
If you look at these startups, I mean, the world couldn't be greener than now.
Oh, I know, it's crazy. This funding of Intop and Bright Machines and Sight Machines, crazy. So as far as, since you're seeing across lots of industries, what's unique about applying AI to engineering and manufacturing compared to, say, finance or healthcare, CPG, other industries that are less around discrete manufacturing?
Well, the interesting thing is with manufacturing and FS, there are some things that are very similar actually. The preciseness, the need for determinism. If you want to calculate your salary twice, you don't want to have different salaries. And the same holds for an airplane. If you want to build two wings, you want them to be pretty compatible.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of things that are very similar in these two areas. The real trick is now with these new capabilities that we got, this multimodality, this multilinguality, this LLM capability of knowledge, interpretation and regurgitation. What can you do with that? Where does it fit and where does it not fit? Where should you go? Where should you not go? And that is the quest at the moment. That's what we're trying to find out.
That's where all the research is aimed at, isn't it?
Yeah, but also not only research, I would say the business itself. And many businesses are really trying to the left, to the right, in the middle, up, down, everything, just to try to find the sweet spot where they can actually use this with great success. And that's an exciting trip.
So speaking of data, then how well do you think today's LLMs actually handle the kinds of data that I encounter in the engineering world, CAD and BOMs and requirements documents is kind of an easy one because that's just language, but structured files like CAD files or BOMs.
Well, we do have an interesting observation there because actually when I joined Capgemini, I had an AI lab only for the Nordics in the start. And there we had some customers that wanted to do document management for big engineering constructions, complex constructions. And there is a lot of blueprints and that kind of data, license data,
Right.
product sheets, specification sheets, and they needed to be analyzed. So what did we use? This was 2019. We used GPT-2. And it's no kidding. We used GPT-2. And why? Because the blueprints, there were these huge pictures, but they had these tables, with
the OCR on the side.
And they were related to the numbers. With GPT-2, fine-tuned GPT-2, that actually worked. And we had one very bright guy in our organization that learned how to fine-tune these models, and he could actually do that already pre-ChatGPT. So that is one thing. But your other question was really about what else can you do with CAD drawings and so on. The thing is that CAD, but also Blender, so there's a specification language behind it. And the same with architecture. If you do business process modeling, if you use Archimate for your business process models, for example, with architecture, you can actually also learn the language behind it and use that to regenerate pictures and images. And so we actually got this request from our engineering department. Like, can we give it a first go? We need to build whatever, a new car. We described the car just in a Word file with maybe some drawings. And then the system makes a initial CAD CAM drawing out of that, or sorry, 3D CAD drawing out of that. And that actually works to a certain extent. I mean, it will not be perfect, but it saves you days of work.
Yeah.
So from days you go to hours. And that's cool.
Very cool. Yeah. Where do you see the LLMs fitting best today? Is it more like just doing search, summarizing stuff, code generation, optimization? What do you think is the most relevant application?
Well, I mean, there is a lot of single applications, but let us just have a look at which capabilities really are useful. And at the moment, I would say there's two things that are really flabbergasting with this technology. The one is the multimodality. So the ability to put picture, sound, text,
all in one thing.
Speech, all in one thing. We have never had that before.
No.
You can take a PDF now with an engineering drawing, with a specification table, maybe even with a sound file integrated, and you can actually interpret the whole thing.
Yeah,
and that is really new, and we use it too little. This is something so new, we don't really know how to use that.
Oh, okay, so yeah, I can see in engineering we could do more multimodal stuff, looking at the model and then connecting that.
Exactly.
Connecting the dots.
And the other thing that is really new, that is the multilinguality. So, and even, I mean, you speak French with an American accent, I presume. I speak English with a Dutch, Norwegian, German accent, whatever. If I speak Norwegian, I have a Dutch accent, I use a German word. These systems are still able to interpret that.
Yes.
And I am so amazed because you and me are old enough to remember Dragon Naturally Speaking.
Yeah.
And I never managed to train it on my voice so that I could dictate a whole email with it.
Without a
and
mistake.
Now it just goes with no efforts. It is just correctly interpreting what I'm saying.
I found it amazing. I use Otter.ai a lot. And even like you're saying, when you have someone with a foreign accent speaking English, other than the only thing is like acronyms, but then you'd have to train it on what these acronyms mean so it picks up the right acronym. But other than that, it's absolutely incredible.
So I'm really amazed with that. Yeah.
So since you work with a lot of customers, what are some of the biggest data maturity gaps that you see today in industries that are trying to adopt GenAI? Because I think that's the biggest problem, right, is the data and data maturity.
Well, that's a very good point. I mean, let's be honest. If you use a foundational model, everybody who is as good as prompting as you do can be your competitor.
Yeah.
So there is nothing that gives you a competitive edge. And you will still in the future also depend on your own data. And your own data gives you your own space, and it gives you a space where you can be better, more precise, easily integrated in your sector. You can be better than the others. So you need to do something with your own data. So where's the maturity? I mean, the data ecosystem has been the issue for the last 5 to 10 years. That's why we had the data meshes, and that's why we had all these things coming up. That's still just as relevant. I mean, be a good father or mother for your data. Make sure that your data is growing up with you, because otherwise you will lose your competitive edge.
But how, in terms of the customers that you're engaging with through CAP, where are the most, do you see companies are mostly like, say, level 2 or 3 and they're aiming at 4, or they're all like 1 and 2 and thinking that tomorrow there'll be 5? It's all over the place, right?
Very much depending on the company itself. It's not even a sector that's further ahead than another.
It's really company by company.
Where you don't expect that you have organizations that really focused on their data ecosystem for the last 5 years, and they have pretty much done their job. I mean, you will never be ready with data. Data changes.
So, yeah,
but now we get the whole realm of data from the edge. So you get all the sensor data. In addition, we get more and more of that type of data, which we also have to integrate. So, and what I do with engineers is often, the tier 1, 2, and 3 discussion in engineering. I add the tier 4 to it, which is the foundational models on the outside. So you get a completely new capability on the outside as tier 4 that is sometimes integrated by tier 3 suppliers like SAP, Salesforce, and you name it. But this is bringing a new capability, but also new risks into your whole ecosystem.
Absolutely, which makes me wonder, when you're seeing the best company, the best examples of companies that are succeeding at that, are they having a hierarchical structure with a data line of reporting that's separate from IT? Because from my reading, it seems like that one of the problems we've done is we've assumed that these data things are just an IT problem, and I don't think they are. They're a business line problem, but it can't be owned by the business line because they're only going to look at their own interests. So you really need sort of an independent CDO.
So what you ideally want, Michael, is really a data ecosystem and an information architecture that is independent of the type of use.
Or the system too. Right?
Independent of the technology, definitely, but also independent of the business lines.
Politics.
So you need an information architecture that is generic enough to actually, on the one hand, resolve the data lifecycle of an object, and on the other hand, make sure that you can hook all that stuff into it. And there are solutions to that. There are very interesting architecture patterns for that kind of architecture.
But I'm thinking more of the people problem of how do you ensure that that the XCOM, the execs understand that, and then they make sure that doesn't become politics.
But my experience is that if you really have a good story around this information layer, everybody understands data. And most companies are technology businesses now, and a technology business is driven by data. And that's where we are.
Right.
In many cases. I mean, I don't really know many examples of technology businesses that are not driven by data. That is what you do with AI. And you make decisions based on your data. You make analytics based on your data.
Absolutely.
And so on. So the interesting thing there is that on the board level and on the work floor level, an information architecture that explains how your data object runs through your organization and how it's governed, you can hook everything up to it, because you can talk about the production of it, you can talk about the publication of it, and you can build an architecture that allows the ones that are publishing it or using it to your clients, that they got a lot of freedom in what type of technologies they use there without destroying your information architecture. And that is, I think, one of the things we see in many data ecosystems, that the whole architecture of the technology, the solution architecture, is too much depending on the final use. Which means that as soon as the uses change, like they do now, with all this AI that comes, you will have many new use cases. You need to redo your data ecosystem. And you don't want to do that. So you need to be more generic. And that is also, I think, one of the reasons that this whole idea of knowledge graphs is coming up more and more.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And do you feel that it's easier to do this from a green field than from a brown field? Or is it the same problem? It depends on...
Well, if you're from a green field, you have the advantage that you can do whatever with your architecture. If you're from a brown field, you at least have data.
so there's a trade-off.
The question is if you have to start building your data landscape from scratch, and you have to collect the data from scratch, that is a big issue. And we are far enough now that AI is also starting to help us with transforming data ecosystems into something more. And so that fits well. Yeah.
What should companies stop doing when they say they want AI in the product pipeline? What are they doing wrong when they say that?
When they want AI in the data pipeline?
When they just say we're just going to do AI, what things, what
Oh,
are the pitfalls they
in
should not
general.
do?
Well,
Yeah.
this is the question I've actually got for 25 years now. My PhD started with that, with the German car maker. And literally the question in my PhD statement was, the board wants to do something with AI. Explain us what we could do. And that question is still very much there in many organizations. Yeah, so I mean, it's not the question whether you should use AI or not. The question is really, do you want to automate? And I think you should. And automation can be much. It doesn't need to be digital even. And sometimes a conveyor belt between factories is
That's
already
just
an
that.
optimization that does more than anything else. But once you decide to do something digital, then you have to decide, where do I need automation that is flexible, not flexible, deterministic, non-deterministic. And you need to map what your needs are, and then you can find out what types of AI you can use and which kind of infrastructure you need to put in.
Well, I was saying, like, what kind of pitfalls? What are sort of the things, like the directions they shouldn't go? Like they shouldn't say, I don't know. I'm just gonna give AI to all my employees and then just let them go at it.
Yeah. Well, we do have that kind of examples. So we do have clients that actually, from a board level, say, okay, AI is fully available for everyone because we want to learn. But then they also accept the risk that it brings to the organization. And the risk is not only that you get a wrong answer, but it's also data leakage. It is a lot of risks that you can have with external models.
Or you get overconfident, you fire people like Klarna did, and then you have to hire them all back because nothing works anymore.
That made it backtrack. That went too fast, too soon.
Or IBM, right?
Yeah,
Recently.
yeah. Yeah, and I didn't. Silicon Valley has the slogan "Move fast and break things." That is good if you want to do something new, but they never care about cleaning up
The mess.
behind them. And I think if you're a CEO or you're in a board of directors and you're producing something, you cannot do that. I mean, you cannot just break everything and hope that you don't have to clean up any mess. I mean, I think there's very few boards that want to accept that kind of thing. So you need to be a bit aware of what you're doing. Klarna is one example. We had the Canadian airliner. And they made a chatbot, but they were not aware about the risk. So they said, okay, we just put it live in public, and then it costed money, and then they withdrew it again. So they didn't do a good risk assessment there.
Right.
Because if they had done that, then this would be okay. That would be part of the game. It can go like that.
So we can't really treat it as the one size fits all. We really have to adapt it case by case where it's most
I mean, you
necessary.
can build pretty generic infrastructures now. That's another very exciting game. You could theoretically build an infrastructure based on AI that is self-organizing and flexible. So if your task changes, this whole supply chain infrastructure can change
It all adapts.
automatically. And that is the theory. And for 1.5 years back in San Francisco, I had a little discussion with Jim Van from NVIDIA on this gaming.
You're right.
And he was talking about a game engine that was just sitting in the bottom of the NVIDIA hardware. And you come home and just say, okay, now I want to play something immersive with the space rocket, and I want to learn how to steer the space shuttle. And you could just start that game. It would just be made on the fly. Now, imagine that you can do that with your supply chain or your organization. I mean, it's still a bit futuristic, but we are going step by step in such a direction.
How do the most innovative companies internally use AI in product development today, as far as the customers you've seen?
Well, we have seen interesting cases in CPRD, for example, where AI really plays an important role in identifying communities, emotions of communities, product opportunities related to that, and also proposals for not only the product itself, but also the design and the marketing material in several languages for several parts of
So like the ideation process.
The whole ideation process you can really enhance enormously with that.
I find it's very good for brainstorming in general.
Yeah, and tutoring. Tutoring is also extremely good.
Teaching people, yeah.
Yeah. When I had a keynote last time in Germany, and I don't speak too much German, so I went. I was in the car, and I just had a dialogue with ChatGPT about the topic of my keynote, and I was just challenging ChatGPT while writing in this conversational mode, as an a tutor, a sparring partner, to actually challenge me with questions and so
Yeah,
on. And it was beautiful.
it's amazing.
And that kind of things are really cool. Yeah.
And do you think that the use of an AI by a vendor, whether that's a small startup or a big player, does that translate into better AI adoption by the customers themselves? In other words, are there a lot of AI transformations inside companies that happen because they bring in an external vendor, or really it has to start internally with the mindset in order to take full advantage of it?
Well, yeah, I think that last point is very important. I mean, if you cannot just buy an AI culture. I mean, you cannot buy them.
But it could serve as a catalyst,
Yeah.
perhaps.
Yeah. Well, sometimes we have extremely cool cases that we have implemented before. We have startups that do amazing things as ideation, maybe that first round of a product, but you need also to bring your own internal organization with you. So the whole culture needs to be changed. And it's not an AI strategy you need, but it's really this automation strategy. So what does it do with your culture? What does it do with your product strategy? Really every aspect of it.
Um, what do you recommend for companies to do in terms of building internal agents or rely on external tools and APIs? I mean, at what level should they be looking at when you're talking about automation? It should be like N8N, cursor kind of stuff, or like what I've seen, which is LangChain and LangGraph, like the low level kind of stuff.
No, I
Just
think
where do you
the
start?
long-term vision is really to have an ecosystem, a worldwide ecosystem like the internet, maybe the internet of agents, where you just collect the agents you need for your tasks. Maybe some of them are your own, maybe some of them are
From the outside.
hired or whatever, maybe open source, maybe they're there, maybe not.
So the death of SaaS, basically,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, it is really like collect all these agents you need to do your task and let them perform. That is the utopia of this agent thinking.
Which is going to be a major upheaval in terms of billing, right? And in terms of the economics of our
There's a lot
industry,
of
right?
things that need to be solved. Yeah, also the whole energy consumption of it, but not even that. I mean, also the discovery of agents. How do you discover the agents you need?
Right.
And what about malicious attacks and adversarial attacks with an agent? I mean, there is so
And
many
the man
things.
in the middle attacks that
Yeah,
we're already
all that
seeing,
kind of
right?
stuff is already. The Carnegie Mellon just had a research on that, where agents were just playing full play just because they needed to fulfill a task. Yeah, but that kind of things will probably happen. No? You cannot fully control all of that.
That reminds me of a talk because you and I met at the Capgemini Engineering Horizons Conference, which I found absolutely fabulous. And there was a woman from, I don't know if you remember that talk from the woman from Oxford University that was talking about robots and the necessity in the robot world for an electronic black box. And so when I've thought about using AI in manufacturing engineering, I thought about, okay, so when we build this airplane that crashes or a machine on the software kills somebody because of AI, how do you roll it back? How do airplanes have a black box, so we can actually figure that out in most cases. But for this prompting, I mean, how do you back up this 25 billion or 27 billion parameters and the 18,000 prompts? That's really an issue. Is that in terms of guardrails and determinism? I suppose you could talk about deterministic there.
Yeah, but I mean, if you really go to that utopian scenario of agents, the internet of agents that are really a whole ecosystem of themselves, you get the same problems as in society. I mean, one agent misbehaves. What do you do? How do you actually track it? How do you trace it? And there is a lot of that kind of issues that are unresolved yet. We don't have answers to that yet. But at least in some cases where you see that things are misbehaving, currently it is still the complexity is still so low that we can actually take it out. But there should be governance structures for that. And this woman from Oxford that you referred to, I forgot her name as well. I'm sorry.
Doctor, I'll look it up. I'll put it in the post in any case. I'll send it to you. I wrote it. I had an article.
She had a good story around that on how you can actually start to think about the black box so that you at least can trace what happens and the explainability of what happened. Yeah. But you can also easily create race conditions. We have seen that in 2010 with the stock markets. Two agents bidding against each other and the whole New York Stock Exchange crashed within a few microseconds. And
it's like when
I want to have that on a global scale.
I was at the. Uh-oh.
We're raining.
It's raining, yeah. The camera's going to be fine. When I was at the Share PLM conference in Jerez with, I don't know if you know Share PLM, Helena Gutierrez, and we had a breakout section on AI, and Rob Ferroni and I were doing an AI one, and it was interesting in my little group. One of the ideas was maybe instead of the AI always saying, fantastic idea, this is great, we need the skeptical one saying, no, that's crap, and that, it's almost like we need to train the models to be a little bit questioning themselves and questioning something, and not just trying to please the person that's talking to them.
But we do have that implemented in a way, in a naive way, in O3, for example, in OpenAI, they do that where you have different agents. So one finds an answer, another one asks for alternative answers, the third one criticizes the whole bunch, and the fourth one
that's already there.
An answer. So yeah, with an LLM, if you do it in several spaces so that they actually are competing, it works very good. So you get much better answers. Still not perfect, but you get much better answers. So that works. But now you have the same thing, of course, with human and culture. So we have now companies, like you said before, that just want to use it everywhere with no questions asked. And we have clients and companies that want to restrict everything. And so, of course, the answer is somewhere in the middle. And we need to get this experience so that we can actually change our cultures. And for that, you need to learn. So you need to be enabled. If you're not enabled, you cannot learn.
But do you have any practical tips on companies in terms of building their own domain-specific co-pilots?
Well, you don't need even. I mean, there's several things to that again. I mean, the first thing that was built was the chatbots. Right? That is the kind of really query answer.
Here's your documentation.
And that is already very interesting for many organizations. They don't have that yet.
Right.
To a good extent. The co-pilots are an integration of that with your productivity tools, your Teams environment, whatever you use. And that's a co-pilot. And if you automate that, let this co-pilot automatically change your calendar, make your appointments, read your emails, then you get a kind of an autopilot. And then these can actually communicate again with other agents, and then you get a multi-agent system. And so there is a path that you should go through that makes sense, so that you both bring your organization up to speed, your people learn, and you see and understand much better what the risks are in your own ecosystem, so that you can actually take wise choices, I would say. Yeah.
So for you, what are in the next 2 to 3 years, which is even, normally we used to say the 5 to 10 years, but we can't even say 6 months. Yeah. But what's the most exciting stuff you see coming down the pipe in, say, 2 to 3 years? Before, let's say, 2028, what is the most exciting stuff you think is going to happen?
Difficult to say, but I think one of the things that really will have an impact on all of us is if this automation, the real autonomy, really starts to hit us in our daily life.
Skynet kind of stuff.
No, I mean really autonomy, so that some tasks are really taken out of your hands. And if that works well, then I think we will really see a change. You have it to a little extent in your car. If something really weird happens in front of you and you have a new car, it will slam the brake. And that is also an autonomous agent that actually is allowed to use the camera and analyze it and actuate a brake. So it has agency, it has authority, and it has autonomy. If these three things come together,
agency, authority, and autonomy. I like that.
Yeah,
very cool.
It's also in the white paper that we have on the internet.
Yeah, like a little publicity there. What AI capabilities do you think are still out of reach for engineering, but are probably coming soon?
Out of reach I think everything is within reach for engineering, but the thing is, what would really make sense to use? But one of the things that is interesting, which I really like, is the edge AI. So AI on the edge. So what can you really do on hardware with small footprints? That makes a lot of sense, because we are collecting massive amounts of
billions and billions.
Can we do something on the edge already to actually filter it, combine it, merge it, compress it, associated. So what can we do on the edge? I think that is for engineering.
That's exciting.
A nice one. Yeah.
And if you were investing in an AI first startup, what would it look like?
That's very good. That's very good. Well, if you do it well, I had to talk with Jim Van, you just need the infrastructure. You can just tell it what it has to do. And we're still waiting, by the way, for that one person unicorn that was promised us for.
That's true.
2 years ago, I think. Yeah. So let's see if that is going to be a Tesla story or not.
So then I had this other fun thing to do just to wrap up. a lightning round. We'll call it AI snake oil. So in terms of some of the terms that we're throwing around all the time, whether they're overhyped, underrated, or spot on. So digital twins,
They are at the moment spot on, I would say.
auto ML.
Yeah, what is it in the terms of autonomy and autonomous agents? It's progress from there, I would say.
Probably overhyped then, or
Auto ML also.
understood.
I mean, in engineering, it's probably discussed. I don't hear it so much anymore.
No, no, me neither. Explainability,
Oh, that is underperforming.
underperforming. Graph ML
GraphML or GraphRex.
or Graph
Yeah,
Rex.
yeah. It is hybrid AI. I think it is the circle that closest that we started with. So I think it is not good enough yet. It should be further developed. I think there's a lot of potential in it.
Ontologies,
Also, I mean, you need some kind of a vocabulary that you
a semantic
trust.
web in order
Yeah,
to
you need some
understand.
kind of a cement and a common understanding between worlds. And ontologies are one of the possibilities that we already developed that you can use for that. And from there, we will probably develop more.
Prompt engineering.
I think that is a bit on the way out, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so
I
too.
mean, you use it less and less. But maybe it's also because people get accommodated now. And you get more and more systems that create the prompts for you. So,
Synthetic data.
oh, that is underestimated, I think. Underestimated. I think with synthetic data, you can do quite a lot. It has building data sets with synthetic data for testing purposes, for training purposes, also for preventing or changing biases in data. There's nothing such as unbiased data, it doesn't exist. But for your task at hand, you need a neutral bias for the things that are important. Right? It doesn't make sense to have a gender neutral biased data set for ovarian cancer. It simply doesn't make sense.
Right.
So this kind of things we need to work a lot with. Synthetic data has one real drawback if it's used with LLMs, and that is that it can really pollute the internet so much that it becomes obsolete. There was a philosopher for 3 years ago that wrote a paper. In 3 years from now, the internet will be obsolete because all these things that are created are not perfect. They have whatever, an error margin, and then they're used for training again. So you're just destroying your own data. And somebody else said the last model that was trained on good data was GPT-3, which I thought was okay. Tell us which data you're training on that. You know?
Exactly. Well, that's been great. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Rob.
Thank you very much.
That was fun, and we'll see you on the next podcast.
Bye bye.
That was fun.